I wanted, so as we're just kind of getting started, I want you, in if you're able to be in a chat, to write down when you think of Purim, what comes to your mind. And don't press enter yet. Just put it into the chat. Like when you think of Purim, like what comes to your mind? And just kind of put it in there. Don't hit return yet. Just write it in. Um, and do we have it? Do people kind of have something written down? Have it in for those who are ready. Okay, so on the count of three, if you can press return so we can see our different things. 1, 2, 3, go for it. So we have like a Megillah reading in the costumes, a Purim Spiel, kids in costumes. Absolutely. If we added in Hamantaschen, that would be like another thing of it because it's not a Jewish holiday unless there is food associated or not specifically associated with it. And what I wanted to do with all of these things is that we have all these traditions that come for Purim, but where do they come from? And they do come from the reading of the story of Purim, which comes from Megillat Esther, which is in our Tanakh. It is one of our scrolls that we read. And so what I wanted to do today is to just do like a really basic, here's the basic information about it, and then to go into a little bit of where do we get some of these customs of wearing costumes with the groggers, mishloach manot, other things that that we do. So do I have anyone that has this sheet that I did that wants to read kind of the story of Purim that I took from one of my favorite books on holidays? It's called The Tapestry of Jewish Time. And what Rabbi Nina Beth Cardine does is she takes these all of our holidays and she brings a modern twist to it. She helps us to kind of understand like what's the background of it, but how can we understand it in today's world and really kind of connect to it in different ways than maybe how we were taught about it as children. And so she gives like a nice, good summary of it, so we don't need to read all 9 chapters of Megillat Esther to be able to understand kind of the basics of the story. So do I have anyone that has it in front of them that would be willing to start to read this? Heather, it's nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Okay. The plot begins after 7 days of drinking and feasting, when Ahasuerus, king of Persia, invites his queen Vashti to parade her beauty in front of his drunken companions. She refuses and is punished with banishment, an appropriate if severe measure, say the king's advisors, else he and every other man in the kingdom would suffer the derision of their wives and would lose control of their households. Ahasuerus, how do you say that?
Ahasuerus, yeah.
Ahasuerus, lonely now, searches the land for a new queen. After months of interviewing, he chooses a beautiful young woman named Esther.
Wow.
What's that?
No. I know.
Her real name is Hadassah, which means myrtle in Hebrew. But this is a book of hidden identities. So only we know her real name, and only we know that she is Jewish. Esther itself recalls the Hebrew word meaning hidden. Just tell me when to stop if you want me to.
Keep going.
Okay. Meanwhile, Esther's uncle, Mordecai, has enraged Haman, the king's chief advisor, for Mordecai would not bow before him. Haman receives permission from the king to decree that on 13th Adar, the people of Persia should rise up against the Jews and kill them. His argument is one that will echo throughout the ages. There is in your land a people spread out and living among all the nations of your kingdom, whose religion is different from all the others. They are dangerous and they do not obey the rule of the king. When the royal decree is made public, Mordecai tells Esther that she can no longer hide the fact that she is a Jew. She must petition the king for the safety of the Jews. Esther replies that she cannot appear before the king unless he calls for her. Otherwise, she would be put to death. Mordecai tells Esther that no matter what the risk, she must go to the king uninvited if necessary. So Esther fasts for 3 days and calls upon the Jews to fast with her. Then she presents herself before the king. Haman, meanwhile,
Let's stop right there for right now.
Mhm.
So can people tell me what are some of the key themes that are coming out from the story so far? What are some things that you kind of notice, represent, understand of what's happening, of the basics of the story? And you can just say it out loud. There's not so many of us that you can just talk or write it into the chat if you'd like to.
Hidden identities.
Yeah, hidden identities. One of the first things, I mean, right at the beginning of the story, we're introduced to Esther, right? And we always call her Esther, right? But actually, and what you'll see if you turn to the next page is that in chapter 2, we're introduced to Esther, and and it said, right under wearing costumes, and we'll get into how this is connected to costumes. It is said that he, which is Mordecai, was foster father to Hadassah. That's the first way that she is introduced to us, and we never really use that name. That is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and then goes on to talk about her being beautiful and all of those things. So what's interesting about the fact that her actual name is Hadassah, and does anyone know what the name Esther actually comes from in the Hebrew root? It means, Esther means, it comes from astir, which means hidden. So her whole name is actually hidden. And that's the name that she has used. So only, and as it just said, and the kind of explanation we were given, only we, the readers, know that she has this other name, Hadassah, which we know of, like a Jewish Jewish women's organization called Hadassah that has been big. We're going to be celebrating them in a few weeks here. But it's actually, she goes by Esther the whole time, which talks about the idea of hidden identity. From the very beginning, she is told and she is introduced in a way that actually hides her identity, of who she is, of taking this Hebrew name and bringing in this other name of Esther to be able to connect with it. So all of a sudden, all about things being hidden. Anything else that we kind of notice? And we're going to go back to that in just a few minutes as we talk about costumes. Anything else that we kind of notice so far?
Rabbi, she's Esther's reluctant, so I guess there's a reluctancy, right? To
Yeah.
more as her to know you've got to do this.
Yeah, she's reluctant. She doesn't know, like, that also goes into this like identity. Like, who am I? That I'm the one that should like go and do this, or like what's my role? How am I connected? Definitely people kind of playing in, and her playing in of like, what does it mean to be Jewish? And a woman and a leader and all of those things in this kind of moment in time, living in the secular culture that is all around them. Absolutely. Anything else?
She is a reluctant leader.
Yeah.
She wants to stay in the background and is reluctant to come forward.
Yep. Yep. Right. Of like, is she ready to really put herself out there? And so she kind of hides, right? That's going back to that hidden, like hiding in the background. I don't want to be out there in front of everyone. I want to kind of be back here. Why am I to be the one that goes there? And the last thing I would just say before we kind of move on is that we also see that the Jews are spread out amongst the land, right? It's not like all the Jews are living right there. This is a land that people are spread, living amongst the nations and are spread out. So the Jewish community is very immersed into the different parts of the Persian culture there and are kind of out and about, and you don't necessarily know if they're like who's Jewish, who's not. You know that they're Jewish, maybe you don't know that they're Jewish, but they are not all together in one place. They are spread out. Very similar to what we see today in our world of Jewish community, especially Contra Costa, right? We say Temple Isaiah is your Jewish neighborhood because when we're in our own neighborhoods, we're just one of a few Jews living amongst them. Even if there is like a number of them, we are definitely spread out. amongst the nations, amongst the neighborhoods, the areas of that. And we see that here. All right, so let's go to that second page, where we get to learn a little bit about Haman and him coming, or a little bit more about Haman. So we start with Haman, meanwhile. Does anyone want to read this page for us? Deborah.
Haman, meanwhile, impatient for the 13th of Adar to arrive, determines to tend Mordecai himself, and so builds a gallows, 50 cubits high, upon which to hang him. The king is not angered by Esther's sudden appearance in his court. In fact, he is delighted to see her and offers to grant her most extravagant wish. Esther does not tell the king about Haman's plan right away. Instead, she invites the king and Haman to a dinner, and after the dinner, she invites them to a second dinner. It is only at the second dinner that Esther reveals herself as a Jew and accuses Haman of wanting to kill her and all her people. The king is furious and orders his men to hang Haman immediately on the very gallows he has built for Mordecai. That is the end of Haman. But even the king cannot annul a royal decree. Sometimes when hatred is unleashed, it is impossible to rein it in. So he does the next best thing. He issues a second decree permitting the Jews to defend themselves against those who choose to rise up against them. The Persians react with shock and fear. Many become Jews, for the fear of the Jews has fallen upon them. Others support them. Many princes and governors and those who did the king's business helped the Jews. Still others cannot resist the royally sanctioned opportunity to fight the Jews. But the Jews successfully defend themselves on the 13th of Adar and celebrate their victory on the 14th of Adar. That is the day that has become Purim. The Jews of the walled city of Shushan fought on the 13th and 14th of the month and celebrated on the 15th. That is why today Jews in Jerusalem and other cities that were once walled celebrate Purim on the 15th of Adar.
All right. So we get the rest of kind of the story that we may or may not know, of how the Jews become victorious and all of this, and that are told, as we do even like before we come out of Egypt, we're told you're going to remember this day forever, you're going to celebrate it, all of that. Same with we have here with Purim, that this is a time of celebration, of Jewish pride, that we were able to bring all of this in. So now it becomes, all right, so we have this story, but how then do we take this story and celebrate what this story is about, and bringing in kind of the different layers of the story that we see through the Megillah into it. So I want to take that apart and kind of start looking at some of these traditions that, I mean, I have years and years of pictures of me in Purim costumes, and it's all about ordering the Purim costumes. And only one of them ever was of me being Queen Esther. Every other one was of different things. And how do we take this story, right? And then come up with these carnivals and spiels and funny costumes that we now have today. So if we go to the next page, we have the idea of wearing costumes. So we already have this first part that we talked about before of the hidden identity. And that Hadassah was Esther's real name, but that she goes by Esther throughout the whole thing. And then just a few verses later, we find that Esther did not reveal her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had told her not to reveal it. So we're told throughout the story, don't reveal who you really are. And so we start to kind of get this idea of this, that in order to celebrate this holiday, that we go and we hide our true identities, that people should not be able to tell who we really are when we go to show up. So we know that this tradition of wearing costumes has gone back to like the late 1400s, and a lot of it started in Italy, actually, with this idea of going to wear, and they were starting to do some plays and different things. And so they would start to, that was the first time it was ever mentioned. Now it might have started even before that, but it's the first time it was mentioned. and that people were starting to just dress up. And it was also told that, later on, if you think about what season this is in, and if you live in New Orleans, you totally understand this season and know that a big part of this season and where this is like taking place, especially in certain places around the world, is that this is Carnival and Mardi Gras season. So as we know, like in Jewish tradition, that we often connect into those things that are going around. What else is happening in the world around us where we're living, and we start to take in some of those traditions to help us celebrate. So here we have that there's Mardi Gras, we have that it's Carnival, we can start to see where we're getting, and this is the season, the spring season when Purim is, that we start to see this idea of bringing in carnivals and dressing up and getting all excited. Um, and and then with it comes connecting that all back to this idea of Esther and hiding her identity. And so we bring in that tradition with what's going out into the world, and we go and we hide our identities, not our Jewish identities, but our just personal identities, allowing ourselves to be whoever we want to be, getting silly, having fun, dressing up. But one of the other things that kind of comes up in this is that unlike pretty much every other story that happens in the Torah, there's something that is missing, or I'm going to call it a character, but that's not the right word to use, but to help you, who or what is missing from the Purim story as we were just reading through it? Deborah.
God is missing.
God is missing. Not once do we ever hear the mention of God. So is it that God just doesn't play out in it? Or some people say that maybe God is also hidden into the story as well. Like it's a hidden identity, that maybe God is actually there. We just don't see God in the way that we normally do. So where like Passover, God is like, right there central to the whole entire story, with the opening of the Red Sea, of lending a hand, talking to Moses, doing all these things, actively involved. That was the beginning of the Jewish people. And if we think about Purim, which is taking place much later on, in Jewish history, that we as a people have involved. And so also our relationship with God has evolved. And so maybe God is also hidden in lots of different ways, that God doesn't speak to us in the same way that God spoke to us with Passover, but God is definitely present, but hidden, something that we have to search for. And so perhaps God is hidden in costumes or in different identities or in different ways in the story, which then kind of connects us back to this idea of wearing costumes. And
Rabbi?
yes, yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I just when you were describing all this and the God not being in the story, it sort of brought me back to also the Hanukkah story, which we don't see God in, and we also tend to have parties, celebrations, times, and also I'm wondering if there's also parallels with obviously a military victory with Hanukkah, but in a sense also with Purim too, in a way, right? Because we were we had to there was a armed struggle aspect of Purim, and so a lot of parallels with this historical armed struggle, God not being a central figure or entity in the story, and yet also maybe parallels to how we celebrate it too. So just interesting,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And because they're also both stories that take place much later on, right? They're not stories that are in the Torah, right? And events that happen in the Torah that are happening later in history where we as a people have evolved, right? And we're living in different places. I mean, this is in the diaspora. That one was in Jerusalem. But it doesn't matter, like our relationship with God has changed, which also means that we as a people need to have more strength, right? It's even more so up to us at this point to be able to be that, like God's not going to be there in that same way to like lend that hand, right? To reach out, to have these like incredible miracles, right? The miracle, well, maybe the miracle of Hanukkah, whatever, we could get into that the whole time, but yes. But that was also our strength, right? So being able to get back there was our strength. It was coming together as a people. It was about standing up, right? Whether it was the Maccabees or it was Esther, right? It's about us finding that strength, and maybe God's in us, right, or around, but it's really up to us to be able to do that. And for sure, and I think that tells a lot about, how do we as a people live in a diaspora, live in a time in which we don't necessarily have God speaking directly to us, and that way that we see in the Torah and coming in there. Yeah, for sure. Any other thoughts, questions about the ideas of wearing costumes and identities and those things? Yeah, Deborah.
So maybe it's because I work at UC Berkeley,
Yeah.
but I feel like every day I'm wearing a costume and I'm not allowed to be fully who I am.
Hmm.
And I know my daughter is a hospital worker and she has to wear an ID badge with her name, and her name is much more Jewish than mine. And she's in fear.
Yeah.
And so I really identify with putting on the false identity because I'm seem to be doing it a lot lately.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very close to home right now. This story, and what do we reveal and what do we not reveal? And what is our name? And like, what is are we the Hadassah? Right? Or the Esther? And do we go on, or do we even have the choice? And I've heard that actually from a lot of people, depending on what your last name is. There's certain last names that you cannot hide your identity in that same way. And what do we reveal and when do we reveal it? And when do we need the Mordechais that one sometimes tell us to like hide it, and sometimes they're the ones to tell us this is your time, right? It's like maybe we were born, as it says in the story, like for this moment in time to reveal it. And that's what Esther is told when she switches over to actually reveal her identity. It was at that moment in time that we needed her to not necessarily be Hadassah, because she never changes her name in that way, but to be outwardly Jewish. And she had to figure out a way that she could do it in a comfortable way. She didn't do it how Mordecai said. She had to do it how she needed to do it for herself. And so how could she build the relationship with King Ahasuerus, that he would trust her, that she knew that she could be safe telling him that she was Jewish. She didn't do it at first. She actually had two parties. She built it up over time. She built a relationship with him that when she did reveal her identity, they had already had a strong relationship that he could see her for all her parts with it. And I think we can take a lot from that in this moment of thinking about when we do that. Other thoughts on this? Yeah, it's a very real thing that we hold and we're struggling with right now. So let's continue with it. So we have this, the identity, the costumes, all of that, and then we go about hearing the Megillah. So just to talk a little bit, maybe I should have started with this part too, of just understanding where the Megillah comes from. So we always call it Megillat Esther, where the book is, where we're doing it. We actually have 5 scrolls in Judaism, and they're all in the Tanakh, in the sections of the writing that and they respond to a lot of our different holidays that we have. So we have like the Songs of Songs that we read during Passover. We have Ruth that we do on Shavuot. We have Lamentations, Eicha, that we have on for Tisha B'Av, remembering the destruction of the Second Temple, and we have Ecclesiastes, which we read during Sukkot, and then we have Esther. What's interesting is that Esther is the only scroll that we have that we actually, like, it's still in a scroll form, and we actually chant traditionally from that scroll. The rest of them, we don't have. Actually, we at Temple Isaiah do have a Ruth one, but most of it, it's not like a Torah scroll. It's actually the Esther. It just is like kind of rolled up a little bit, and we have it in a little tube. We actually have it up in the sanctuary. I don't have it down here with me. It's in this like silver tube. And that is how we have tradition to date back of doing this throughout time, to be able to read from it. Where the rest of them, we don't call it by a scroll. Esther, we do with that. And it's tradition to read it on the night before as Purim is starting. So a lot of times we read Torah on the daytime, but for Esther, it is tradition to start it in the evening. You do it then, and then you also do it the next morning during services. We don't usually do services here for Purim, but some synagogues, more traditional, will do it in the morning too. We focus in on the evening celebration. It's written in the same fashion as our Torah scrolls are done. And it used to be a really big deal because Torah scrolls are so big and they take so long to make, they're also really expensive. But because Megillat Esther is only 9 chapters, it's actually pretty small. And so it became a tradition actually for families to have their own Megillat Esther, and that they would pay for that to be able to have that. And they would get these like silver cases for it and be this beautiful thing that they would have it in their houses to be able to say like, I got this important part of it, which is really interesting as it's not written, it's not the Torah, but it's Megillat Esther. And so we see that with it. And as we kind of are talking about the reading of it, so the tradition got to be that we read all of this, we go to the groggers because we don't read it in the traditional fashion. And actually, it has its own trope. So those of you who kind of know of the trope, that for each holiday we have different melodies of it. But in Megillat Esther, and this is where if Cantercorn was here, he could give you a lot more information on this. It actually changes tropes in different places depending on the mood of what is going on. So there's moments where it's more like Eicha, where it's like the sorrowness that we feel. And sometimes it's more the liveliness of Purim that we kind of have, because there's those different aspects that we kind of hear in it. But one of the greatest traditions that we know of reading Megillat Esther is about the groggers. So why is it that Haman's name, do we have the tradition of using the groggers, so the sound makers or the booing, to blot out Haman's name? Does anyone know where does that come from? So if you look on the third, whatever page of this is, it says groggers. If you look, it actually doesn't come from the Megillat Esther. It comes from Deuteronomy. Okay, so Haman's definitely not born during Deuteronomy times, but he is connected. So there's a tradition that we are to blot out, forget about Amalek. So Amalek, as the Israelites are going through the desert, they're traveling through the desert. There's this group of Amalek, and it says here, remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt. How, undeterred by fear of God, he surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary and cut down all the stragglers in the rear. Therefore, when your God Adonai grants you safety from all your enemies around you in the land that God Adonai is giving you as hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. So we're supposed to forget Amalek and don't forget Amalek. We're supposed to blot it out of remembering of someone who came up from behind, right? Like, it's not like come from the forward, let's have a real fight. This wasn't a real fight. This was coming up from behind. And it is said that Haman is connected to Amalek, that he is a direct ancestor of Amalek. And so therefore, and there's like a whole thing that you can get into how that's all connected in. But the basic idea is that they're connected to each other. So just as we're supposed to blot out Amalek, we need to blot out Haman. So it's not just that he is a bad guy. And the story is that we want to, is that we are taking this tradition of blocking out his ancestry, who is trying to like hurt us, is coming up from behind, is trying to get us in these different places. And so it started way before we had our traditional groggers today, that people would take stones and click stones together or wood sticks together whenever to hear Haman's name blotted out. Sometimes they would even write on with chalk on the bottom of their shoes to stomp it out. So therefore, like it would wipe it away, that we can get rid of Haman that way. And over time, we started to see like our modern groggers develop. In Hebrew, it's the word for is grogger, but in Hebrew, it's ra'ashan. And yes, and as Kendra said here, it's blotting out all that he stands for, right? It's like we want to get rid of kind of all of this, and so it's both that we're blotting out and we're making this noise you can't like, so you can't even hear it, right? It's not that it's quiet, but you can't even hear it.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Yeah, question. So I'm just wondering, like, where does the, and I get the connection then, why we do it, but
Mhm.
like you said, connecting, it's sort of like a Torah scroll and everything. I mean, we don't have a lot of other traditions or customs where we make noise generally when someone is chanting. So where
Yeah.
did this whole idea of we should be interrupting the person who's chanting with anything, whether it's sticks or rocks or groggers or something, to like, boo I get why,
Yeah.
but where did that kind of start to, how did that come into play all of a sudden, that we now have like, we're like yelling boo during, a traditional ritual chanting of one of our texts, right?
It's a great question. I don't know the exact answer. Like, I know that it started like in the 1200s. Like, I mean, it's
Okay,
been a long time
like
of
a
kind
lot.
of doing it. Yeah, and that it goes back to Europe. That's kind of where it started, or at least that's where we can find out that we know at
Yeah,
least then that it was done. Where it actually started before that, um, and yeah, beyond that, I think,
yeah,
porn's supposed to be done in this kind of silly way, right? Like we're dressing up in costumes, so it's already supposed to be very different than anything else. Like that's kind of like part of it from the beginning, that we're supposed to remember this, and it's supposed to be this celebration, right? That we're supposed to celebrate it. And so we're supposed to like be loud and crazy and having fun with
that
it.
makes
And so I think that like kind of allows for us to do that versus, and I think most of the time that it was being done was not in the synagogue, like when we read Torah. Well, I mean, even the Torah when we originally started wasn't done in the synagogue either. So,
yeah,
but it
but
was like we were holding it up, and I don't think we hold up this in quite in the same way.
got it, that
That
makes
we're
sense.
supposed to be silly. We're supposed to be like, I think normally we're supposed to be serious people. This is where we're supposed to allow us to be whoever we want to be and having fun and kind of doing that. Um, and I think it also keeps us connected into the story as we're going on, right? Like, especially for the kids, right? And I think it was really the kids that got to make all these things and to stomp and to do all of that. And so we come up with that kind of tradition with it. Moving on from there, we also have our great tradition of the Hamantaschen. Um, and this kind of comes, you can see in Esther 3:9, like as Haman is trying to get this decree of the death of the Jews, right, and putting them up into killing them in front, it then goes reverse onto him later on. What he has done then ends up happening to him. And we hear that in like the 1500s in Italy, we're back to Italy again, that we start hearing about this idea of the eating of Haman's ears. It was originally known as Oznei Haman, so Haman's ears. And originally the idea was that when someone, let me make sure that I get this right, is that when someone was hung, traditionally back then, it was that they cut off their ears first. I know you might not want to eat hamantaschen after this, but that was like the idea of it. And so because of that, that's one of the connections in. That is one tradition of it and why we call it Haman's ears or Hamantaschen, but it goes beyond that. So if we also look into, we're living amongst other times, one of back in he was trying to fill his own pockets, right? Haman to fill his own pockets with money and other things and bribing the king. And so poppy seeds, right? We're filling like our pockets. Like if you think about a hamantash, it looks like a pocket and we're filling it with little like coins, poppy seeds of coins also comes into this kind of tradition, right, of it. And so and so we started to do that. And at first it was only poppy seeds that were done. And part of that is because this is what was available at the time around, that they would do poppy seeds. And originally it wasn't a cookie. Originally it was like a pastry. And so there were lots of pastries that were being made. And the way that you folded it, it was easier to do it in a triangle than it was to be able to do it like in a circle. And over time, once yeast was developed, and we started to be able to make cookies and other treats like that, it became a cookie rather than a pastry. And so therefore, we see that more in the 20th century. But we also can think about it too, of the Hamantaschen also is about hiding things, right? So if the middle and the way that it was originally made, like kind of what was in the middle was hidden. So first it was poppy seeds, later on in the 20th century where we start having more of an ability to get a lot of more like fruits and jams and chocolates and Nutella and all of those things that started getting made into it, and that you would hide those inside the cookie. So you wouldn't know what is going to be the flavor inside. And so you can think about the Hamantaschen also kind of representing the hidden identity of what is inside with it. Any questions about the Hamantaschen? Great. So I like to think about it more as the hidden parts versus Haman's ears, as much as it's like his ears. So one of the things that people forget about, so we have all these traditions of like the fun of it, but there's also a big part of looking at how do we like reach out to others. And so this next part that we have is this one section that I want to read at the very end with the celebration in it. So it says in chapter 9, at the very end, it says, "And the same days on which the Jews enjoyed relief from their foes, and the same month which had been transformed for them from one of grief and mourning to one of festive joy. They were to observe them as days of feasting and merrymaking, and as an occasion for sending portions to one another and presents to the poor." So it's really important here that it isn't just about the joy and merriment as much as that is, that yes, it is about one of the things that we're supposed to do is we're supposed to like come together and eat together. We do more of carnivals now, but it's tradition to be able to come and have a Purim Seudah, a Purim meal together, to be able to join together as community, bringing us all together as community. Since we're so spread out, you do that. And so it was tradition that a lot of people of this feasting and merrymaking will often do like Persian food. And eat Persian food because this took place in Persia, and being able to do that, or just the idea of bringing people together in a meal of anything that's joyous for the occasion. So that was one of them that we're supposed to do in it. We're also told that we need to be. It's an occasion to send gifts to one another. So Purim, up until Hanukkah became a big deal in the 1920s, it was actually Purim was the bigger deal, especially for kids. And Purim was a holiday in which people really gave each other gifts. And so what these gifts are called, they're called mishloach manot, and they're sending portions of food, or like in Yiddish, you'll hear some people call it shlach manas. Is that we're sending like gifts of food to one another. And it comes later on in the Talmud is where it takes this and says, okay, well, what does that mean? Like we're supposed to, it says, like 2 portions, right? There's 2 different things. And so you're always supposed to do it where you give them at least 2 things in it. Because it didn't say like just sending a portion, it says sending portions. So at least 2 things that you need to send, and you send presents to your friends and families. And so they would like do Hamantaschen, they would do chocolates, they would do like other great things, flowers, whatever it is, to be able to take this joy that we're feeling and send it out to one another and to show one another about it. And that was one of it. And then the other tradition that also became, and also one of the mitzvot of Purim, is that the last part of this, it says presents to the poor. Once again, it's in the plural and not in the singular. And so these are called matanot le'evanim, and it literally means gifts of the poor. And so that it's said that you need to give at least to 2 different people, because it's portions or gifts and the multiple. So you need to not only give gifts to the people that you know, but you also need to think about the people in our community that need support. And so it became a mitzvah with Purim that we are to take and to go and give to at least 2 people, 2 organizations, to something that in this moment of joy, as we're celebrating, as we see in lots of Jewish tradition, we're also supposed to be thinking about those in our community that need the support. And so you can kind of do that. And so you'll see a lot of times in Jewish community that we'll have like a food drive perhaps, or we'll do other things to remind ourselves in this joyous occasion with it. Yeah, Deborah.
It's also another way that we out ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I walk over to my neighbors and give them this, I have to explain the whole story of why I'm giving them these gifts
Yeah.
on this odd day of the year they've never heard of.
Totally. And it doesn't, yeah, because it doesn't say in there who the gifts are for. Right? I think a lot of people take it as like other Jewish people that they're gonna go and give these to, but to give it to anyone, that this is the time of giving gifts, yeah, that we have to out ourselves. Or we get to like bring ourselves up and help people to say this is a joyous time, a time for me to think beyond myself.
And it's also that the community, I mean, there is an aspect of Purim where the community didn't fight as hard as they could have.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and that we see that what was I gonna say with it? The other thing is that if we think about the giving of to the poor, and we also bring in the concept of the hidden identity, we're told that the highest level of tzedakah is when people don't know who is the person that's giving. And so we actually bring those 2 in with Purim, that we can hide our identities, that we're going to give it out and that you don't know who you're giving, like the person doesn't know who's receiving it. So like, for example, we have started every few years now, we've done a Mishloach Manot gift exchange at Temple Isaiah. So people got to write in and they were just putting this together. And so we have different families who are giving it to different people, but no one knows who it's coming from. Like it's a hidden identity. So you can't actually go and say thank you. So the person who gave it to you, just get this treat and this connection from another, other members of the Temple Isaiah community to that. So it's done that way with the Mishloach Manot, but also like the hidden identity aspect of it. But then also when we go to give on this, all the more so, let's hide our identities so we don't embarrass, so we can really go and give that way. Any other thoughts, questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you
Go for it,
hear
Cindy.
me?
Yeah.
Okay. I apologize if you covered this in the Hamantaschen portion,
No.
but my Zoom kept disconnecting me.
Yeah.
So I was listening about Hamantaschen representing Haman, and I with those always hear that it represents Haman's hat. Did you talk about that at all, or have you heard that? And
Yes,
is that
it
just to
can be
protect our
Haman's hat.
children from a disgusting? Okay.
Yes. So that's where I think it kind of moved. I did not talk about that specifically. I think that over time, since we like not calling it Oznei Haman, like his ears, because of like kind of that reference of where that really came from and like trying to teach our kids that? And do we really want it to be connected? More so of his hat seems like to be like it's still representing Haman, eating Haman, all of that. We want to have the joy of it versus the evilness of that. We've moved to that idea of it. And then there was all these other connections. I don't know if you heard that of like the hiddenness of like the different types of treats that are in there. As well, that we have like the different types of connections that we can read into the Hamantaschen as well. Okay, and then we're almost to all of our last things, and the one of the final things is drinking on Purim. So this is, I mean, we actually have wine and drinking are associated with a number, like as we're about to go to Passover soon after, and the 4 cups of wine. Wine gets into this in a much different way. So we read in the Talmud, and we have here Megillah from the Talmud, and it says, Rava said, a person is obligated to become intoxicated with wine on Purim until he is so intoxicated that he does not know how to distinguish between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordecai, right? That you can't tell the difference between Haman and Mordecai. You're supposed to get that drunk that you can't tell it. In addition, it says the Gemara relates that Rabbah and Rabbi Zariah prepared a Purim feast with each other, and they became intoxicated to the point that Rabbah arose and slaughtered Rabbi Zariah. Killed him on Purim, right? Okay, so we're going to come up to why this is all in here. The next day, when he became sober and realized what he had done, Rabbah asked God for mercy and revived him. Okay, it's a story. The next year, Rabbah said to Rabbi Zariah, let the master come and let us prepare the Purim feast with each other. He said to him, miracles do not happen each and every hour, and I do not want to undergo that experience again. If only that were the case every time that someone made this big mistake from drinking. Why do you think what is these 2 stories together telling us about our celebrations of Purim?
Drink, but not too much.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to get to the point like it is a time to just let loose, right? Like we need those times in our lives, right? It's like I think especially with just like what the challenges were for the Jews living in Persia at this time, like to let out our stress, like yeah, sometimes we need that where we can't tell the difference between all the things that are happening in our lives, from the difference between the hatred of Haman and the blessedness of Mordecai, that we can't even tell the difference because we're to that different state. And don't go overboard, like to the point that you're going to make, like, you're going to be stupid. You're going to make bad mistakes and all of that. And so it really has become a tradition in a lot of communities where drinking is very much a big part of Purim. And people they get into it, especially if they're going to be at a spiel, they're going to do something, they'll take shots, they'll go and do it. And it's reminding us that like, as much of that as it's tradition, we still need to be responsible. We still need to be thoughtful of this. And so therefore, if you're going to go and do it, it's like, go have fun, but don't be ridiculous. Think about your actions, do all of those things. And so we'll kind of see that. Though I have been in communities where I don't think that they quite remember that second part. They've definitely done the first part well. Times in college or New York, like in New York, like you'll see that people go out, like on the Upper West Side when I was living there, people are out in the streets, like, and they close down certain streets, like in New York, and everyone is out there, and especially like the 20s and 30s, like people are in it. They remember the drinking part, they remember the merriment part and going and the joy. Hopefully they remember the second parts as well. And that's like where the Megillah is read, and that's where people are in costume and doing kind of all of that. And so we come to the final thing of this, of that everything is like beyond the spiel, right? There's so much more to this than just the spiel. And yet the Purim spiel is such an integral part of the Purim thing. And so this has been probably since around like early on that Jews started to like take on this idea of like, let's have fun with this. Like from the 1400s or before that, people would get into costume and they would start to entertain the audiences around Purim. Yes, we had the tradition of just reading the Purim story from Esther, but that it was also like, let's have fun. Like if we're going to have joy. And so they would started by, it started like really with like yeshiva students and others that would take different parts of it. And I think there was always such like a seriousness with them, but now they could just dress up, right? They could get out of their like serious identities and go and be whoever they wanted to be. And so it started where with yeshiva students who needed to, like, they didn't make any money. They were in school all day. So if you can think of like Christmas carolers, but now bring it into Purim, that these yeshiva students would go and they would come up with these little skits and they would go knocking on people's doors and they would do the little skit, kind of like the carolers, right, singing. And they would ask for money at the end. Like, I'm going to do the skit and then give me some money. And it was like a way, it was almost like a fundraiser that started that way. And so they started to do it over time. And this became a culture. And sometimes because we were supposed to, bring people in for a meal on Purim, that sometimes people would bring in these yeshiva students or others into their house to have some food as well. And so there's kind of that exchange. Over time, it wasn't just like amateurs, but professional performers, including acrobats, would then really go on tour, right? And do these long prologues and epilogues of like different things that were silly. They were kind of related into the story, but not necessarily, but allowing it to just make fun of the world around you. So if you can think about like late night TV shows, right? Or SNL or things like that, that's where it like kind of started more like that you would do like little things of making fun of Jewish life or life around you or anything, because it was just supposed to be time of merriment. And then we kind of moved into, and you still see that sometimes today in certain communities, but a lot of communities, you see what we do at Temple Isaiah, that we take on the story and we play it up with something related to today's world. For example, this year it's all about Barbie, and taking on Barbie world is being brought into many of our spiels that we're doing to kind of have fun with that, with song and dance and being silly. And we're still telling the story, but we're doing it in a slightly different way to kind of bring people in. And that's where it kind of has moved over time to bring us to today, where we now have this excitement, and you'll see in kind of our traditions here at Isaiah this year, from doing Mishloach Manot with lots of families participating in that, to having a spiel, to having lots of Chumantashen, bake-off, to having a carnival, just like there was the carnivals of like Mardi Gras and so on and so forth. We have the carnival aspect, and we have lots of dressing up in different costumes as we come together. And all of that comes from this tradition that we see in those 9 chapters of Megillat Esther, of taking the story of Persia, of being in the diaspora, and keeping us who are in the diaspora really connected to our past. And as we see, a lot of these realities and things that come up in the story are very much a part of our world today, from hidden identities to dealing with hard things and needing to bring joy together. Let's bring it together, and let's not get overly drunk, but we can get drunk and joy and having fun. That sometimes even during the hard times, as we experience today, we need to just let loose. We need to be able to go put on whatever identity that we need, or joyfulness in whatever way that we need, to be able to handle the challenges that surround us. Any last questions or thoughts? Great. Well, Michael, I just saw that you.
No. I'm just
Oh.
gonna say thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
yeah.
your time. This has been great.
Absolutely. And I hope that you'll all join us, not this Saturday, the following Saturday night for the Purim Spiel. And we're making it into a whole party since it's a Saturday night. You can't even see it, Margot Robbie is just sitting right over there in my office, ready for being Esther. I think she's Esther. I don't know. Ether, you're in the Purim Spiel, right? But there's gonna be lots of like food and drinks and fun on that Saturday night. And then the next day with the Purim Carnival, the kids were gonna do it in a way that works for them of all ages, having lots of fun. So I hope to see you all there. And it was nice to be able to learn with you today. And next month, I'll be back for Passover, and how we got the Haggadah and the way that we know it today.
Thank you so much.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. It's great to see
Thank
you
you,
all.
Rabbi.
Great.
Take care.
Thank
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great
absolutely.
session.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, bye.